So we've talked up to this point about the control plane. We've talked about the management plane. We've mentioned a number of times the data plane. So what does that actually look like? Well, the data plane is the place where all the work gets done, right? The data plane is where my ESXi hosts live. It's where my KVM hypervisors live, my bare metal servers, if I've got any of those. The data plane is where the NSX edge node lives. The data plane is where we're passing packets, right? Where the virtual machines live, where the containers live. The data plane could include cloud stuff, right? Cloud workloads and the NSX cloud gateway as well. But again, the cloud stuff is for another video, right? That's not for what we're talking about here. So the data plane we mentioned before in an earlier video is stateless. The data plane forwards traffic. It's completely distributed, right? The data plane is where everything actually happens, right? It's where my overlay tunnels are instantiated and terminated. It's where my uplink interfaces are cabled and connected. It's where my NIC teaming or link aggregation is configured and negotiated. This is all part of my data plane, right? So the data plane lives down in the hypervisors themselves. So the data plane is made up of transport nodes, right? We've talked about transport nodes, or at least mentioned the term a few times, right? My transport nodes are hypervisors or bare metal servers or edge transport nodes that have been prepared to work with NSX, that are attached to my management plane, that are ready to go. They know about NSX. They have the bits, all of the host agents or control plane agents or things like that installed. They have all the stuff installed. Now, could be a hypervisor, right? Could be an ESXi host, could be a KVM server. Could be an edge node, right? An edge node we'll talk about later on. We have a whole big set of discussion going on there, but an edge node is a pool of compute resources that we can set aside for network services, load balancers, NATing, uplink routing, right? Things that I do in the network that can't be distributed, or at least can't be distributed easily. And then we also have, in the context of NSXT, bare metal transport nodes, bare metal server transport nodes, and these can be Linux or Windows server machines that have the NSX components installed and are actively participating. I can actually put my applications running on physical servers on overlaid networks. I can protect them with the distributed firewall, things like that. So bare metal servers give us even more flexibility in the data center with networking and security with NSXT. We are not limited to virtual machines and containers. Now, all of my data plane communications happens through what we call the NSX proxy service on the transport node itself, right? The NSX proxy service is the tool on the ESXi host, on the KVM host, on the Linux server, on the Windows server. NSX proxy is the tool that will communicate up to the NSX managers, either the control plane or the management plane, right? There are different reasons that we'll use to communicate with both, right? But all of that communication is multiplexed, if you will, from the transport node through the NSX proxy service. That NSX proxy service can communicate to or listen to two different ports, TCP port 1234 and TCP port 1235. 1234 is the RPC channel for the manager, and 1235 is the RPC channel we use for the control plane, right? So when we talk about things like, the control plane programs the data plane, the control plane, the central control plane sends data down to the local control plane. Well, that happens between the appliance proxy hub service on the controller on the manager node and NSX proxy on the data plane node over port TCP 1235. right? When we return statistics back to the management plane, when you know, whether it's packet counters or whether it's firewall hit statistics, right? Firewall rule counts, rule hit counts, things like that. Those will be returned to the NSX manager, and those will be returned by way of NSX proxy on the transport node over the TCP 1234 channel up to the appliance proxy hub on the manager node, and then that will be sent from there to the manager. So this is kind of what we're looking at for NSX manager appliance communication to a transport node. Right? And I stress NSX manager appliance communication because notice that we've got separate channels, again, for manager and for control. So we want to keep that in mind. We want to think about that. This architecture diagram covers pretty much all of the communications between manager, controller, and transport node that we need to worry about. So let's wrap up this entire module, right? We have talked about the cloud network framework, right? We've gotten that. We've figured that out. We know that NSXT data center is a bigger piece of this cloud network framework that we want to use to build out our data center and build a consistent networking and security policy everywhere across all of our devices. We've talked about why we're going to use NSXT data center, right? Security, automation, cloud native, that kind of stuff. We have talked about the rest of the product portfolio at a really high level, right? That was kind of a glancing blow over the rest of the NSX portfolio, but we did kind of talk about that a little bit. We've talked about policy. We've talked about manager. We've talked about how policy interacts with manager, how manager interacts with controller, right? How all of the different pieces of the puzzle interact, how the central control plane interacts with the local control plane, and then the local control plane programs the data plane, the transport node itself. So we've gotten all of that put together, right? We've kind of covered everything there over this series of videos. I think we're looking really, really good to be able to start moving forward into things like preparing the data plane. We're in great shape, folks. Come back. Let's see the rest of the videos. Let's learn more about how NSX actually works, how we're actually going to do things with NSX. We'll see you in the next video.